What are some common like mistakes that you've seen startups make early on in the process around marketing?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mutually Human podcast. Our goal, as always, is to have conversations that make technology more human. Today, Mark and I are here with a very special guest. His name is Josh, and he's not only special, but I called you Meta, which I don't know if you loved that title or not, but it is because of Josh that we are here doing a podcast. Josh helps us at Mutually Human with our own marketing needs and has helped us create the Mutually Human podcast, and now you get to be a guest on it. Welcome.
I feel so special. Thanks, guys. Thank you for using Meta, because I usually am kind of in my own head, and that's how I live on a daily basis. So it's not that strange.
It's a good place to live.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today in a little more formal setting than we normally have when we chat about marketing. Can you start off by giving us a little information about your background and your company's background as well?
I'm going to take that really literally. So I'm going to tell you some information about my background.
Oh yeah.
So Lori was making fun of me because this is actually my back porch, but it's super hot today and it's also noisy out there. And so I took a picture of it. I'm using it as my virtual background. So
I like that you act like this is
if
a
I
new
disappear.
thing.
Yeah.
You
it's
have
amazing.
multiple pictures of your house and you will use them and you're never in the same room. It's bizarre.
I want to be real. I want to be authentic in any way possible. Except for actually having a real background. So anyway, my actual background, so I've been doing advertising and marketing for probably going on 20 years now. I started off actually in animation as a little agency here in Atlanta where I live, and worked with companies like IBM and National Geographic and stuff like that, and slowly worked myself up to art director. And then after a while, I really just started getting more enamored with the business side of marketing, which is what's the goal that we're actually trying to reach, or what's the call to action that we're actually driving people to, and what's the behavior that gets them to do that. And so I worked my way there as a creative director, and probably did that for 7 years. Kind of my last big thing was getting to launch the Harry Potter park at Universal Studios, and which is enough to drive anybody out of the industry. But it was a lot of fun, and we rode a lot of roller coasters and stuff like that. That's what I do now. So I get hired very often as a part-time CMO, usually to funded startups. So I would say 90% of my work is with brand new companies and that are trying to define their story and their strategy and put a whole system together.
I know we're your favorite clients, and you mentioned that you often work with startups, but in general, what other clients do you feel like benefit from your service? Is there specific industries you feel like you really work well in, or other attributes that contribute?
Yeah, I think I might have a little bit of a hard time if you came up with a new kind of Dorito and said, hey, sell this to 10-year-olds, or if it was some kind of Mountain Dew or something like that. I don't do very well with consumable products. I usually do a lot better with complicated offerings. So something that needs to be explained, or that people, for the most part, that needs a lot of education, and that there's a kind of a large sales cycle. That's something that I've done for a long time. Even the agency I was at, I'd worked on Ethicon endosurgery, which was, I don't know if you know some of their liposcopic surgery instruments that they have, all the way to things like Universal Studios and Under Armour, which took some more explaining, but in a different way. So that's really what I do well in, and then that's just kind of attached itself to. Sometimes these are software products. A lot of times these are software as a service products. But in some cases they're like you guys, which is B2B, B2B services.
I think that Doritos, a new flavor of Doritos, would need a lot of explaining, because there's only 2 real good flavors of Doritos and they already exist.
Yeah. And then you can make tacos. Maybe we need to make some kind of B2B friendly Doritos, ones that people that wouldn't be afraid to have at a business meeting.
Are you a Cool Ranch or nacho cheese guy?
Cool Ranch. Ask me a serious question.
Really?
Yeah.
Mark, are you Cool Ranch or nacho cheese?
I am not a Doritos guy at all.
Oh, well, you.
I don't eat them on a normal basis. I don't eat it on a normal basis. Yeah,
right.
because I don't want to
Doritos
be.
are a staple at my house for sure.
I'm in a continual fight against being fat, but and I usually lose. But yeah,
Food, overweight, whatever.
whatever. I just sit at my house now and on my awesome fake back porch and eat Doritos.
So Josh, you mentioned this sort of fractional CMO thing. A lot of companies. Tell us a little bit about like what does that mean and what does it look like for the startups that you work with?
Well, it's really important from a startup standpoint. A lot of times when somebody is creating a new business, there's sort of, I call it founder's disease, which is essentially they have a ton of ideas. Sometimes they're good at explaining it, sometimes they're not, but there's a combination of ideas and everything like that in their head. So they really need someone to help them define their story, define who their audience is. A lot of the same stuff that you guys do in the product development phase, I do the same thing in the marketing phase, and the better it's done during the product development phase, the easier it becomes during the marketing phase. But yeah, I mean, when they come to you, there's a very finite budget. The money is going away quickly, and unless they start making some money, you will no longer be paid anymore as well. So it's really a case where me being a fractional CMO, I can come in and provide that expertise where an agency would be pretty expensive, probably out of their range. Yet like their cousin or Fiverr or something like that is also not an option unless their cousin's really experienced. So I've basically been able to kind of carve out a niche where I can work for a certain amount of hours a month and provide a lot of value really quickly and kind of work. And even if they need a pause, I'm able to pause. So it kind of works with a startup cash flow, I would say.
Yeah, great.
So along those lines, Josh, and we've talked about this before, we have an interesting intersection of clients. We will often build software products for startups, like you're talking about. Oftentimes it seems like people have more of this mentality of, if I build this awesome app, people will just find it. People will come, right? How early, what is your advice in terms of how early companies should really start engaging in some marketing strategies, maybe even before their product is ready to release? Where do you find the right timing in that whole world?
Well, you guys have probably heard this quote, but David Ogilvy famously said, best way to kill a product is to market it well. And so if you have a bad product, it just, if you tell everybody about it, then all you'll get is a bunch of people that are mad at your really well-known product. So I would say probably the easiest thing to do is the better defined the problem is, and even if you have a major problem you're solving for your solution, the marketing can sometimes happen on its own. So I know some people will think like, oh, this is just going to go viral. And I was like, not everything goes viral, man. Like usually it goes viral because it's really bad, or something goes viral because it's so good and it solves such a unique issue that people feel like they have to have it. And I think that's where people naturally share something. But yeah, I would say that, I spend a good amount of time on strategy. And I think that's probably because of the same thing that you're talking about. When you build something, if you're building it because you had an idea, I have been surprised. Like I would have said TikTok is probably one of those things. If somebody came to me and said, hey, can you market TikTok? I think I'd be like, probably not. Because I famously said, like, even when YouTube first came out, I famously was like, to my friends, I was like, who's going to upload a video to the internet? It's like, I don't know why they would do that. So I mean, I think that the times that somebody should get started thinking about their messaging is right at the beginning. So at the same time that you're in product development, you're also probably in fundraising. And so that's when you want to be thinking about, what is the problem this solves? How am I going to talk about that problem and even kind of support it? What are some clever ways, some clever stories I can tell, about that particular issue? And then how is this going to solve all those issues or all those problems? We make fun of commercials that are on late at night, but you can tell if those people have mastered coming out there with coffee, like, has this ever been you? And they spill coffee all over themselves. It's because they've mastered how to tell a problem and then say, here's the solution about 10 times. And usually they have the crowd yell as well. And so yeah, I mean, it's right at the beginning. When should you pay for something? As soon as you need money. It's probably, no one's going to really know about it right away. So, I mean, I think marketing, it really needs to go hand in hand, ideally from the conception.
And you had mentioned, obviously, working with startups or anyone really is probably going to have some sort of budget, right? So how do you determine and how do you help guide companies to know how much to invest in marketing?
It kind of depends on what their goals are, and it also depends on what stage they're at. So I specialize in storytelling, branding, and marketing, and there is a difference, right? You have sales, which is like the one-on-one. I'm going to call you to do something. Branding is all about that feel, and how do I do I feel like they're actually giving me some kind of promise that makes sense to me? Do I feel good about this? Do I want to relate myself to this product? And in a lot of cases, you have to have some kind of brand establishment, even sometimes before you have a problem that you're specifically solving. So going back to the goals, if the goal is I need to generate this many leads and you just came out, that's difficult. And many times I'll say, like, expect to be waiting for a while. You could be waiting 6 months. We don't know we don't even understand how people are going to behave. And there are many times that I've started paying for ads just to realize, wow, that was a really good test to see that nobody wants your
Josh,
product.
what are some common like mistakes that you've seen startups make early on in the process around marketing?
I think some of them is to be a little too salesy, I would say. And it's mostly out of their desperation for how badly they need money.
Yeah.
And I would say that, you definitely, there's a reason that you have funding, right? The reason you have funding is that it's always stressful, but it's so that you don't have to publicly look desperate. I mean, it helps to build things too, but when you're constantly putting out a call to action, when you're constantly saying buy, check this out, there can be a feeling that you're almost like a car salesman or something like that. And so if someone says, I've got 3 months worth of budget, and so I'm going to push it super hard for the next 3 months, the problem is they're not adding really enough value, especially for something. And again, this really has to do with how, what I say, do we need to add a bunch of value with Doritos? Maybe value in I made you laugh on a commercial or something like that. But the harder it is to explain, and the more decisions I have to make to purchase something, then value becomes really important, because I have to build trust with you. And I've seen a lot of startups say, no, we have to start generating sales in the next month, and if we don't, we're under. So we're going to push super hard, and we're going to spam a bunch of people, and we're going to text a bunch of people, and it ends up having a negative effect.
So how do you determine which tactics to use? I know you said you're the budget and stuff is going to be reflecting of the goals that you're trying to achieve. How do you decide which tactics to do?
So everything comes out of the audience. So, and you guys do the exact same thing. So, I mean, you can try to come up with a feature like in one of your apps, but unless it comes directly from, somebody saying like, yeah, this is a really big issue for me, or I don't understand, this is something I hate about every other app I've used, it's difficult to know if a decision you're making is correct. So I try to never pretend like I know exactly what an audience needs. One of the first things that we'll do is I start looking either through current customers, or I start just doing a big deep dive to figure out who the actual customers are. And then we make persona sheets, and it's things like, what are their problems? What are their actual goals? Where do they hang out? I'll go to different websites, go to different groups, and just listen in the kind of conversations they're having, the questions they're asking. And after a while, you start to get a feel of the kind of value you can add, right? A lot of times we underestimate as brands how much we know. If you've gotten enough with your startup, if you've gotten enough to get funding, if somebody's invested in you, or if you've raised enough money yourself somehow through a Kickstarter or something like that, then you're usually pretty intelligent. And the amount of information you have in your head that's just kind of locked in there becomes extremely important and valuable to people that are asking those questions. So that's kind of a little bit of a fire hose, but that's one of the main things that I do is I just try to get myself into the shoes of the audience. And that goes for everybody. I mean, I have a book that's on baby boomer moms. I mean, if you ever seen What Women Want, that's like totally real. But yeah, I mean, you have to just get yourself into the audience and try to understand what they want, not what you want to tell them.
And I know a big part of what you do, and this is again another conversation we have of the overlap, is you try something and you test it out, just like in software, right? Like you try a feature, you test it out, you get feedback, you refine it. And I know the same thing is true for marketing. So what are some things that you do to try something, and how are you measuring whether that result is working to know if you should push harder in that direction or take a pivot?
Yeah. Well, I mean, number one, it hasn't always been so easy to do that. If you guys have ever watched Mad Men or something like that, they used to have to literally go down the street and ask people like, so, what do you think of this product? And they had to pretend like they weren't involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
They had their survey essentially. And even some of the work that I've done, I've done a lot of work in television, and they really don't know. A lot of times they can tell how many people watched it, but that's about it. And so what's awesome about all the digital work that's being done now and all the digital platforms that are available is all the analytics. So I can tell, say we had an idea for a specific ad or a message to tell somebody, we can try to guess if it's going to resonate based on what we know of the audience. We can try to tell some people, but the fastest way is to start to pay and see people click on it. And guess what? If somebody is moving forward and they're talking to you, or they're asking questions, you might have said the right thing. If they're going there immediately leaving, they don't. So we use this thing called A/B testing. You probably use it even within software. I know Google and Facebook, you're like constantly in an A/B test, whether you know it or not. You're in a certain interface, or you're working with a feature that you don't even know that somebody else doesn't have.
Mark loves my current Facebook is completely different than his Facebook.
Yeah, you've got some crazy new dark mode Facebook going on.
Oh, are you like the new interface? I don't have the new interface either. I've seen all these people talking about the new interface. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I've had it for a long time. I don't know what's going on, but
that's crazy. Yeah, and it's pretty random the way they do it, but it's the same. It's the same thing. Google Analytics, and they're, I won't get too deep into it, but it's just a way of tracking everything that you're doing to know what's resonating, what's working. If you are not using things like Google goals and UTM links and things like that to track where people are actually coming from, then you really don't have an idea of what's working, and you are kind of just throwing money. And this is a little bit unfortunate, but I did hear recently a quote that it's like I 100% agree with. It's like, in marketing, the person with the most money a lot of times does win. And you have to be kind of clever. I mean, you have to be really clever if you're not going to spend a lot of money, and then also beat all these other people that are. And I'm not telling everybody it's like, okay, go be clever. I'm saying try to be clever, really know your audience, and prepare to spend a lot of money, because everybody else is, and you're just competing against, eyeballs basically.
So when you're thinking about sort of this like tracking to understand what's working, Josh, obviously there's a lot going on right now with regards to like privacy and limiting what we're tracking and keeping in people. Like, how do you see that, or have you seen that impacting the way you're able to do some of that work?
I haven't seen it impact it yet. It is funny, the different philosophies, because you're talking to a marketer and it's just like a dreamland for me. It's the amount of information that I can get is like amazing. And it's funny. It also doesn't bother me when I'm on something and a really relevant message hits me, and I'm like, good, I don't want an irrelevant message. Yeah, I have to be advertised to, then it might as well be something I want. So I love things like remarketing ads and things like that, where some people get, weird that Google's listening to them or something like that. No, I haven't. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that Facebook got in trouble for, where, for instance, you got to know if somebody recently moved to an area. You got to know if, for a little while there, it was, you got to know if somebody was interacting with different healthcare websites and things like that. You really can't do that anymore. So it's a little bit more difficult. I think you can't even really remarket with any kind of healthcare. Like, if you have a healthcare instrument, you're not allowed to say, I found you on Facebook. Here's this ad over and over again, because the remarketing places they'll disapprove it. So, so it hasn't hit me too hard. What's hit me harder probably is more of like the spam laws. And which those are good, because especially for texting and stuff like that, drives me nuts. They're almost like telemarketers, and that's a little harder, because you're limited to what they say the amount of people you can talk to. So it's not as easy as I'm going to go buy a list of 70,000 people and I'm going to market to them. Now it's more like I have to earn those 70,000 people, which is a lot harder.
Yeah.
So one thing you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation is you're often hired as a fractional CMO, which sounds really important. And
it's like half a CMO.
Like half a CMO.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on consultant versus full-time in-house marketing? So it feels like one of the things, and maybe this is my own misconception of where success comes from in marketing, but it feels like a lot of times it can be more beneficial to have somebody who's like living and breathing your product and your culture to be somebody who's on the front lines of that marketing. So how do you as a fractional CMO get to know the product and the culture in a way that allows you to talk in the way, present that to people, and obviously talk to the right people in that space?
Yeah. Well, I've been on both sides, so I think I really understand the benefits of both. I think I'll start with the agency side. One of the things I miss the most is the amount of collaboration. I still work with agencies. Agencies hire me as a creative director for different clients and things like that. And one thing you miss is there's just amazing talent pool that you'll come up with an idea and then everybody else will 10x it. And that's just fun. You'll come up with a lot of really cool stuff. People will make things way better than you could have on your own. But the part that is difficult is that, all of that talent is very expensive. There's a reason agencies are so expensive. And the amount of overhead, I mean, the people that run those agencies are making serious money. So it's not like it's all going just to pay for the talent. Surprisingly, people in agencies, even though it's a glamorous job, you could be working for a major brand and not make a ton of money. You'd think you would, but you're not. And so I know one thing that I've loved, and this is a lot of times I don't go to a company and say, hey, can I be your fractional CMO or can I go on a retainer? I really come on and just say like, I would, let me work on the team. So I'll come and work on the team. It would be as if I'm an internal marketing provider. What I try to do, and it's not always successful, depends on the culture of the company, is to create that collaboration within the company. So if they do have talent within, I'm trying to, I would say, coach a little bit, kind of creative direct, where they're actually producing stuff as well. And then I have a whole team as well that I work with. And I would say this too about the difference between consultants and maybe a combination of coaching or fractional work. Because I work with somebody else also that's a fractional COO, and it works really well for him too. Is that, a lot of times a consultant is usually, I'm an expert in this one particular area. I'm going to come in, I'm going to review all your stuff, and I'm going to give you 10 things to do, and then we'll walk away. What the projects I choose to be part of is, it's a certain part of my time. I would not say that my business is significantly scalable. It's only the amount of time I have. And so I don't like to do that with companies that I don't like, or, I have kind of a no jerks policy. And it is one of those things where being on the team definitely helps you understand. But there is a little bit of being in this industry where you just learn how to rapidly learn really quickly. Like I said, I've worked in so many industries, and it has gotten down to a fact that when somebody comes to me and says, have you ever worked in this industry or done marketing in this industry? And I just say, like, a lot of times people buy for the same reasons. They make the same buying decisions. They make, and it doesn't really matter what it is, because they're all people. You just have to understand what the problem is, where the pain is, and explain really well how you're going to fix it.
So we've been lucky to have an opportunity to work with you. How can others find out more about working with you on their marketing needs?
Well, thanks for asking. No, and this isn't, I didn't pay for this ad. I didn't pay for that. No, you can go to webadvisorygroup.com. It's web with 2 B's, advisorygroup.com. And you can find out more about this. I think the thing that I love about working with you guys is that we're almost kind of doing the same thing. You're doing the upfront work, and it's really the most important work, especially from SaaS platforms and technology, as if you don't get it right, it's going to be a bad product. But on the other end of it, we can kind of really match up what we're saying to people about how we can add value and things like that. So, plus, you guys are just a lot of fun to. Our meetings. I think we actually
Except
usually
when
get
we're doing a podcast, right?
Right. Then
Yeah.
we're very cold and stiff.
Look, my hands disappear though because of the background. So you forgot, didn't you? We actually get about 20 minutes worth of work done when we're actually meeting, I feel like, because we usually end up just talking
Work
about
hard,
stuff.
play hard, Josh.
That's right.
Play hard.
That's right. So you can find out about me there. I have a podcast called the Startup Sanctuary Podcast. It's meant to be about the personal side of entrepreneurship. And we definitely talk about a lot of tactical stuff too, but I pretty firmly believe that if you're not even either a pretty solid leader going into a new company, or if you have a pretty healthy life, you can sort of expect it to go badly. And that's when you look at a lot of startups that have gone badly, it's usually something personal that happened. It's a marriage that fell apart. It's they didn't have good finances going into it. There's a lot of that stuff, because the other things, there's a lot more resources around. So yeah, that's Startup Sanctuary Podcast, and you can go to webadvisorygroup.com.
Sounds good. And I you knew this is coming, but
Oh, yeah.
one of my least favorite parts of doing these podcasts is the intro and the outro, because like you just said, they're a little more formal and not as much conversational. So I am going to kick it over to you, Josh, to show
Go
us
put on
your
my radio
talent.
voice. Put on my
Yeah.
radio voice.
Show us your talent
102.4. Yeah,
in the
sure.
marketing space, and close it out for Mutually Human for us today.
Awesome. Okay. Well, to everybody, thank you so much for for watching the podcast. Thank you guys for having me on. And listen, there's actually a lot of resources on the site. You can go to mutuallyhuman.com/resources to see tons of blog posts that are more about topics in this area. And we also have this really awesome planner called the Key Q Planner that's really about the essential questions that you should ask before you ever touch a line of code, or you even potentially even bring someone on. One thing that's really cool is that it's completely integrated with the process that Mutually Human uses. So if you can use it as a way to start and to ask yourself some questions, but you can also schedule a free consultation with Mutually Human, and they'll walk you through those questions and go kind of a deep dive, so you can really understand what you're building. So anyway, go to mutuallyhuman.com. I hope that if you have this podcast on YouTube, that you subscribe, and then there's a little bell that will tell you if when there's a new one, and then share it with a colleague. So because there's a lot of people that need to hear this great information. So thanks a lot for listening, guys. This is where we do our Mickey Mouse song. I'm just joking. We're not going to sing. So
I'm getting you a wig, and you're just going to pretend to be me from now on, because you do so much better.
No. All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Josh,
Thanks for joining us, Josh.
Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yep. Bye. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
See ya.